Miss So Miss Franny Block was telling us a story about her family. And it seems like we might be getting into where their family got a lot of their money from. Yep. So she was telling a story about how her grandfather, who was the really, really, really rich guy, decided he was going to go off to war when he was 14. So he lied about it so that way he could go. And what ended up happening to his whole family? He lied and said he was older than he actually was. But what happened to his family? So they burned down his entire house when he was gone. That's just what some people back then did. So let's read a little bit more. Chapter 17. Well, Litmus came home from the war, said Miss Franny as she went on with her story, and found himself alone. Andrew, can you shut the door? Thanks, bud. And he sat down on what used to be the front step of his house. And he cried, and he cried. He cried like a baby. He missed his mama, and he missed his daddy, and he missed his sisters, and he missed the little boy that he used to be. When he finally finished crying, he had the strangest sensation. He felt like he wanted something sweet. He wanted a piece of candy. He hadn't had a piece of candy in years. And it was right then that he made a decision. Yes, ma'am, Litmus W. Block figured the world was a sorry affair then, that it had had enough ugly things in it. And what he was going to do was concentrate on putting something sweet in it. He got up and started walking. He walked all the way to Florida. And the whole time he was walking, he was planning. What was he planning? I asked. Why, he was planning the candy factory. Did he build it? I asked. Of course he did. It's still standing out on Fairville Road. That old building, said Amanda? The big spooky one? It is not spooky, said Miss Franny. It was the birthplace of the family fortune. What is a family fortune? Andrew?
I can't hear you. Who has a life? Who wants to keep their fortune alive?
Not quite like that kind of fortune.
Has a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It was there that my great-grandfather manufactured the Litmus lozenge, a candy that was famous all over the world. Brody, my friend, I did hear you the first time. Thank you. I will be posting this video online. I'll be posting it on Google. I've never heard of it, said Amanda. Me either, I said. Well, said Miss Franny, they aren't made anymore. The world, it seems, has lost its appetite for Litmus lozenges. But I still happen to have a few. She opened the top drawer of her desk. It was full of candy. She opened the drawer below that. It was full of candy, too. Miss Franny Block's whole desk was full of candy. Would you care for a Litmus lozenge? She asked Amanda and me. Yes, please, said Amanda. Sure, I said. Can Winn-Dixie have one, too? Now, I've never known a dog that cared for hard candy, said Miss Franny, but he is welcome to try one. Miss Franny gave Amanda one Litmus lozenge, and she gave me two. I unwrapped one and held it out to Winn-Dixie. He sat up and sniffed it and wagged his tail and took the finger from between my fingers really gently. He tried to chew on it, and when that didn't work, he just swallowed the whole thing in one bite. Then he wagged his tail at me and laid back down. I ate my Litmus lozenge slow. It tasted really good. It tasted like root beer and strawberry and something else. But I didn't have a name for that. Something that made me kind of feel a little bit sad. I looked over at Amanda. She was sucking on her candy and she was thinking really hard. Do you like it? Miss Franny asked. Yes, ma'am, I told her. What about you, Amanda? Do you like it? Yes, ma'am, she said. But it makes me think of things I feel sad about. I wondered what in the world Amanda Wilkinson had to feel sad about. She wasn't new in town. She had a mama and a daddy. I'd seen them both with her in church. There's a secret ingredient in there, Miss Franny said. I know it, I told her. I can taste it, but I don't know what it is. It's called sorrow, Miss Franny said. Not everybody can taste it. Children especially seem to have a hard time knowing it's there. What is sorrow? It's deep sadness. So if you are super sad, it might mean that you are feeling sorrow. I taste it, I said. Me too, said Amanda. Well then, Miss Franny said, you've probably both had your share of sadness. I had to move away from Watley and leave all of my friends, I said. That is one sadness that I have. And Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry are always picking on me. That's another sadness. And the biggest one, my biggest sadness, is that my mama left when I was still small, and I can hardly remember her. I keep hoping that I'll get to meet her one day and tell her some of these stories. It makes me miss Carson, said Amanda. She sounded like she was going to cry. I have to go. And she got up and almost ran out of the library. Who's Carson? I asked Miss Franny. She shook her head. Sorrow, she said. It's a sorrow-filled world. But how do you put that in a piece of candy? How do you get that taste in there? That's the secret, she said. That's why Litmus made a fortune. He manufactured a piece of candy that tasted sweet and sad at the same time. Can I have a piece to take to my friend Gloria Dump? And another one to take to Otis down at Gertrude's Pets? And one for the preacher and one for Sweetie Pie too? You may have as many as you'd like, said Miss Franny. So I stuffed my pockets full of litmus lozenges, and I thanked Miss Franny for her story, and I checked out Gone with the Wind, which was a very big book. And I told Winn-Dixie to get up, and the two of us left, and we went over to Gloria Dump's. I rode right past the Dewberry's house. Dunlap and Stevie were playing football in the front yard, and I was just getting ready to stick my tongue out at them. But then I thought about what Miss Franny had said, about war being awful, and I thought about what Miss Gloria Dump said, about not judging people too hard. So I just waved instead. They stood and stared at me, but when I was almost all the way past, I saw Dunlap put his hand up in the air and wave back. Hey, he hollered. Hey, Opal. I waved harder, and I thought about Amanda and how it was neat that she liked a good story the same as I did. And I started to wonder again, who was Carson? I want to make some predictions. Carson is obviously somebody that it makes Amanda very sad to think about. It is not our Carson in class. Who might that Carson be, Lana? Maybe a brother. Maybe who else, Andrew?
Carson could also be somebody who was really, really, really mean to a man.
Would that make her feel sad? Maybe thinking about what he did?
Yeah.
I think so too. Nathan?
Maybe it's
Maybe it's one of her friends. Let's find out. Chapter 18. When we got to Gloria Dump's, I told her I had 2 surprises for her and asked her which one she wanted first, the small or the big one. The small one, said Gloria. I handed her the candy and she moved it around in her hands, feeling it. Candy? She asked. Yes, ma'am, it's called a litmus lozenge. Oh, Lord, yes, I remember these candies. My daddy used to eat them. She unwrapped the litmus lozenge and put it in her mouth and nodded her head. Do you like it? She asked. Mm-hmm. And she nodded her head slowly. It tastes sweet, but it also kind of tastes like people leaving. Do you mean sad? I asked. Does it taste like sorrow to you? That's right, she said. It tastes sorrowful but sweet. Now, what's surprise number 2? A book. A book? She asked. Uh-huh. I'm going to read it out loud to you. It's called Gone with the Wind. Miss Franny says it's a great book. It's about the Civil War. Do you know all about the Civil War? I've heard it mentioned a time or two, said Gloria, nodding her head and eating her candy. It's going to take us a long time to read this book. There are 1,037 pages, I said. Woo! Said Gloria. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her hands on her stomach. We best get started then. And so I read the first chapter of Gone with the Wind out loud. I read it loud enough to keep her ghosts away. And Gloria listened to it. And when I was done, she said it was the best surprise that she had ever had and that she couldn't wait to hear the next chapter. That night, I gave the preacher his litmus lozenge right before he kissed me goodnight. What's this? He asked. It's some candy that Miss Franny's great-great-grandfather invented. It's called a litmus lozenge. The preacher unwrapped it and put it in his mouth. And after a minute, he started rubbing his nose and nodding his head. Do you like it? I asked. It has a peculiar flavor. Root beer? I asked. Something else. Strawberry? That too, but there's still something else. It's odd. I could see the preacher getting farther and farther away. He was hunching up his shoulders and lowering his chin, and it looked like he was getting ready to pull his head into his shell. It almost tastes a little bit melancholy, he said. What is melancholy? Nathan, take a guess. Like weird, maybe? Melancholy, I said. What's that? It's sadness, said the preacher. He rubbed his nose some more. It makes me think of your mom. Winn-Dixie sniffed at the candy wrapper in the preacher's hand. It tastes sad. It must be a bad batch, he said. No, I told him, and I sat up in bed. That's the way it's supposed to taste. Litmus came back from the war, and his whole family had died. His daddy died fighting, and his mama and his sisters died from a disease. And the Yankees, they burned down his whole house. And Litmus was sad, very sad. And what he wanted more than anything in the whole wide world was something sweet. So he built a candy factory and made litmus lozenges, and he put all the sad he was feeling into the candy. My goodness, said the preacher. Winn-Dixie snuffed the candy wrapper out of the preacher's hand and started chewing on it. Give me that, I said to Winn-Dixie. You can't eat wrappers, I told him. The preacher cleared his throat. I thought he was going to say something important, maybe tell me another thing that he remembered about my mom. But what he said was, Opal, I had a talk with Mrs. Dewberry the other day. She said that Stevie says that you called him a bald-headed baby. It's true, I said. I did. But he calls Gloria Dump a witch all the time, and he calls Otis stupid. And once he even said that his mama said I shouldn't spend all time with old ladies. That's what he said. I think you should apologize, said the preacher. Me? Yes, you. You tell Stevie you're sorry if you said anything that hurt his feelings. I'm sure he just wants to be your friend. I don't think so. I don't think he wants to be my friend. Some people have a strange way of going about making friends, he said. You apologize. Yes, sir, I said. Then I remembered about Carson. Daddy, I said, do you know anything about Amanda Wilkinson? What kind of things, he asked. Do you know something about her and somebody named Carson? Carson was her brother. He drowned last year. He's dead? Yeah, said the preacher. His family is still suffering a great deal. How old was he? 5, said the preacher. He was only 5 years old. Daddy, I said, how could you not tell me about something like that? Opal, other people's tragedies should not be the subject of conversation. There was no reason for me to tell you. It's just that I needed to know, I said, because it helps me explain Amanda. There's no wonder she's so pinch-faced. What's that? Said the preacher. Nothing, I said. Good night, India Opal, the preacher said. He leaned over and kissed me, and I smelled the root beer and the strawberry and the sadness all on his breath. He patted Winn-Dixie on the head and got up and turned off the light and closed the door. I didn't go to sleep right away. I laid there and thought how life was like a litmus lozenge, how the sweet and the sad were all mixed up together, and how hard it was to separate them out. It was confusing. Daddy! I shouted. After a minute, he opened the door and raised his eyebrows at me. What was that word that you said? The word that meant sad. Melancholy, he said. Melancholy, I repeated. I liked the way it sounded, like there was music hidden inside of it. Good night now, the preacher said. Good night, I told him back. I got out of bed and unwrapped a litmus lozenge and sucked on it hard and thought about my mama leaving. That was a melancholy feeling. And then I thought about Amanda and Carson. And that made me feel melancholy too. Poor Amanda. Poor Carson. He was the same age as Sweetie Pie, but he would never get to have his 6th birthday party.